Three Kingdoms of Ancient Egypt Literacy Check. Egypt's three kingdoms. The Egyptian civilization is generally divided into three periods: the Old Kingdom, the Middle Kingdom, and the New Kingdom. The Old Kingdom. The first period of the Egyptian civilization is called the Old Kingdom. It lasted from 3100 BC until 2040 BC. Before 3100 BC, Egypt was really two different kingdoms: Upper Egypt and Lower Egypt. These names are deceiving because if you look at a map of this ancient country, you will see that Lower Egypt was located in the north at the top of the map, and Upper Egypt was located in the south at the bottom of the map. This is because the Nile flows from south to north. It flows parallel to the Red Sea and eventually empties into the Mediterranean Sea. The First Dynasty. About 3100 BC, King Menes, a king from the south, was credited with combining the upper and lower kingdoms and uniting Egypt. Menes became the first pharaoh of Egypt. Pharaoh was the term given to the king or ruler in Egypt. Menes was the first king of the first dynasty of Egypt. Eventually, there would be 30 dynasties to rule Egypt. A dynasty is a series of rulers from the same family or line. During the Old Kingdom, pharaohs were considered gods. They owned the land and everything in the country. They could do anything they wanted and make any law they wanted to. This was called the divine right of kings. Many pyramids were built during the Old Kingdom as tombs for the pharaohs. One of the most important pyramids was the Great Pyramid of Giza, built for the pharaoh Khufu or Cheops. Menes made Memphis the capital of Egypt. To help run the large country, Menes assigned people he trusted to govern different sections of Egypt. These governors, or nomarchs, worked to be sure that all of the commands of the pharaoh were obeyed. In order to make communication easier between the pharaoh in Memphis and the nomarchs in various parts of the kingdom, the Egyptians developed a written language called hieroglyphics. Hieroglyphics use pictures of objects, such as animals or plants, to represent words. The Egyptian writers or scribes wrote their messages and kept records on a paper, like material made from the papyrus reed. The nomarchs gained power. By about 2200 BC, the nomarchs began to act more independently and obeyed the king less. Many broke away from Egypt, establishing their own provinces. Some of the nomarchs fought against each other's territory. Eventually, two separate kingdoms were established. The Middle Kingdom. In 2040 BC, King Mentuhotep of the 11th dynasty reunited Egypt. He created a centralized monarchy which launched the period known as the Middle Kingdom. He made Thebes his capital. The nomarchs lost power, and Egypt again became a centralized government. The pharaoh had all of the power in the country. Things went well for the Egyptians during this time. Egypt became prosperous. New quarries were developed in order to build more temples and other structures. They built dams and a reservoir to manage the floodwater. They expanded their kingdom south to Nubia. Egyptians brought gold, ivory, and slaves from Nubia. They also expanded trade during this period. The Egyptians traded with those living in the Middle East, along the Mediterranean, and in other locations. This trade brought peace and wealth to Egypt. Egyptians had time to create works of art, build temples, develop crafts, and practice their religion. The Middle Kingdom ended in 1800 BC when Egypt was conquered by the Hyksos from Canaan. The Hyksos were good soldiers and had superior weapons. The Hyksos had horse-drawn chariots and curved swords called scimitars, which were made from bronze. The wooden weapons of the Egyptians were no match for these modern weapons. The New Kingdom. The third period of the Egyptian civilization is called the New Kingdom, and it lasted from 1600 BC until 1100 BC. This is considered the last great period of Egyptian history. You probably noticed that the Middle Kingdom ended about 1800 and the New Kingdom began about 1600. What happened to those 200 years in between? Did Egypt cease to exist? In a way, it did. During this time, Egypt was conquered by the Hyksos, who had superior weapons. Eventually, the Egyptians began using these newer weapons as well and were able to win their country back from the Hyksos. Egypt was united once more, and the new kingdom, sometimes called the Golden Age of Egypt or the Age of the Empire, began. Egyptian armies conquered Syria, Palestine, and the area west of the Euphrates River, and Egypt became wealthy. Pharaoh Amenhotep V forced the people to worship only one god, the sun god Aten. He closed the temples of the other gods and had workmen remove the plural word gods from buildings and from other structures. He changed his own name to Akhenet, which means spirit of Aten. He created a new capital named Akhenaten, devoted to the god. When Akhenet died, Pharaoh Tutankhamun restored the old gods and made Thebes the capital again. Beginning in 1070 BC, the Egyptian empire began to decline. There was a civil war. Egypt also had to defend itself from many different invasions over the years. Egyptians fought the Hittites, the Libyans, the Nubians, and the Sea Peoples, invaders from somewhere in the Mediterranean. Over a period of time, the Egyptians were invaded by the Assyrians in 671 BC and the Persians in 652. Alexander the Great conquered Egypt in 332 BC and installed Ptolemy, a non Egyptian ruler. Ptolemy's dynasty ruled until the Romans invaded in 32 BC.